So if I can just take as much out of my brain power as possible, because of course you're the expert in talking about your brain under stress. Essentially you go from normal human being to just above probably a baboon when the tones go off, because your adrenaline's pumping and everything like that. If I can free up as much brain power as I possibly can by making certain things muscle memory, I'm doing myself a service, again, my crew a service, and ultimately the people I serve.
Stay tuned. Coming up, it's my interview with my son, Cameron.Gasaway, a career firefighter with the Madison, Wisconsin Fire Department, sharing lessons that he's learned from his first 5 years on the job. But first, let's hear from our amazing sponsor, Midwest Fire.
Every day, the hard-working men and women at Midwest Fire build the most reliable firefighting apparatus to be found anywhere. Their customers know a well-built fire engine means lives and property saved. Midwest Fire, a factory direct manufacturer dedicated to helping you extinguish fire before it becomes a raging beast. To learn more about what fuels their passion, visit MidwestFire.com.
Hello and welcome to the Situational Awareness Matters Show, episode 345. I'm your host, Rich Gasaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SA Matters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming in time to prevent bad outcomes. For those who joined us for the past 3 episodes, you know that I had pneumonia. And thanks to everyone who reached out to me, and I'm on the mend now. Today's feature segment is sponsored by Gasaway Virtual Training. We have 33 online training programs for your members. Some of the programs are live events presented virtually, and some of them are pre-recorded programs. To learn more, visit samatters.com website and click on the Virtual Training tab. All right, let's jump into our feature segment, my interview with my son, Cameron.Gasaway, a career firefighter with the Madison, Wisconsin Fire Department, sharing lessons learned from his first 5 years on the job. One note, due to some technical challenges, this will be an audio-only interview. Well, Cameron, it's been nearly 5 years since we've sat down and had a conversation about the fire service, and some might remember that episode 5 years ago. But before we jump into where things are today, why don't you just give us a little bit of your history as to where your interest came from to be a firefighter and how you got your start in the fire service?
Sure. Well, of course, it all started as far back as I can remember, going to the firehouse with you and climbing on rigs and everything to do with that. And then I became an explorer at 16, an official explorer at 16. I hung out with the explorers even before then. Became an official explorer at 16, did that all the way through till I was 18 and graduated high school, joined the Marine Corps, became an aircraft firefighter for the Marines, and then after that, I joined the City of Madison, Wisconsin Fire Department in 2015.
And what did your initial training at Madison consist of? Because you started, I don't know if everybody starts this way, but you started in what's called an apprenticeship program?
Yeah, so there's a initial academy. That's 13 weeks, so that's your firefighter 1 and 2, stuff like that for people that don't have those certifications already. And then, of course, kind of an indoctrination into how the Madison Fire Department does things. Then after that, you go out to the field, you get your station assignment, and then you go through an apprenticeship program for 3.5 years. And through that program, you're responsible for quarterly assignments. So you do all the research on it, you create an outline, that outline has to go to the training division to be approved, and then you present that topic to your crew. Most of the time it's some sort of PowerPoint or classroom presentation followed up by a hands-on practical application type drill. So one might be forcible entry. So you create a PowerPoint about the different tools and different techniques and stuff like that, and then you take your crew over to a force entry prop and actually go through all of it. And those topics range anywhere from, like I said, force entry, ventilation, fire pre-planning, EMS.
So you're learning by teaching? Is that the concept?
Yeah, essentially. So it's you get better because part of it is, your crew gets to razz you a little bit. I know that's hard to believe for some people that your crew would do that, but you want to make sure that you have the answers to all the even crazy little cosmos questions that you can come up with. I think one of the famous ones is, what for your SCBA apprenticeship assignment, what's the technical name for the little rubber bumper that sits on the bottom of the air bottle? And that's always a crew favorite to throw out there, because unless you've literally read Scott's technical manual, you're not going to know
So what is it?
the elastomeric bumper.
The what?
Elastomeric bumper?
Oh my goodness.
And I might be pronouncing that wrong. But
Well, I've been in the fire service for the better part of 40 years, and I just always call it the little rubber thing on the bottom of the bottle.
right. That's what everybody else calls it too. But and that's one of the first assignments you do, so it's a crew favorite to get you nervous right away. So, but you learn a lot, of course, by doing your own research, and then of course you have to go through the SOGs, the policies and procedures, because they want a certain amount of Madison specific stuff in your program, and then you can also add in tips and tricks from like your other firefighters or your promoted drivers, things like that. So it kind of gets you comfortable asking questions with your crew members as well, and kind of gets that dialogue of kind of that senior person mentorship rolling.
Is there a book that the apprentice gets that you have to like check off things or accomplish things over a certain schedule of time over that 3 years?
Not exactly like that. So there are you have evaluations, and on your evaluation sheet you sit down with your lieutenant or lieutenants, depending on what station you're at, and they'll go through, and it's things like engine company operations, EMS operations, ladder company operations, stuff like that, and you get graded on those as you go through. And of course the goal is to go from basics to I won't quite say mastery, because I'm not sure mastery is a thing that we can achieve in the fire service, but the goal is to show improvement and get to as good as you can in all those skills by the time you reach the end of your probation. So you get those evaluations through your probation, and then
How long's probation?
a year and a half. So a year after you make it out of station, or make it out to the station.
Okay, and then the transition from Apprentice the Journeyman is an official step within the department?
Yep. So the apprenticeship program is actually run through the state of Wisconsin's workforce development state organization. So you actually get a card that certifies you as a journeyman status, and all your hours get reported and stuff like that.
During your first 3 years while you were as an apprentice, what were one or two or three of the things that most surprised you that you didn't expect when you come onto the fire department? Because you'd been an explorer, you had been a firefighter in the Marine Corps, but this is your first career municipal fire department. I'm sure you come in with some ideas or expectations, good or bad or whatever they were. What are some of the things that you could say now, like, well, I didn't see that coming, or I didn't expect that to be, how things are. And I'm not asking you to be critical of the department, just to say what things, were pleasantly surprising for you or just unexpected for you.
Yeah, so one of the biggest surprises, and I think anybody who gets their first, municipal fire department job will say is how different things are once you make it to the field versus the academy or versus your firefighter 1 and your firefighter 2. So, of course, coming up, explorers, they teach everything kind of to the book. It's helping you prepare and build a basic knowledge base and a skill base and everything like that. So everything's pretty well done by the book. The Marine Corps was very much by the book, as you could imagine, an organization like that. So everything was very firefighter 1, firefighter 2, IFSAC, IFSTA, whatever book system you use. And then even coming through the academy for Madison, they had to follow certain things along the way because about 50% of my class did not have firefighter 1 and 2. I was fortunate to already have it from the Marines. So they had to, those people had to pass the state certification test for their Fire 1 and Fire 2, so a certain amount of it did have to be taught to the standard. And then you get out to the station and, you're doing your first couple drills with your crew, and they're like, all right, yeah, you did that really good according to the book. Now let us show you how you do it faster, do it better, and do it with less work. So that's probably the biggest culture shock type thing, because I spent so many years, once again, as an explorer, then in the Marines, all that kind of stuff where it was just book. And now you come here, and I was fortunate to have some very, very intelligent and great lieutenants starting who essentially even, from the beginning said, if you see something, say something. If you they were very open with having a dialogue, which coming out of the Marines, they were obviously not very open to dialogue if it wasn't coming from the top down. So that was also a big change of pace for me. Then my lieutenants wanted thinking firefighters. They didn't want you to just step off the rig and go into robot mode. They wanted you to step off the rig and take a look and think for yourself.
So what you're saying is one of the surprises was that the way things are taught in a formal academy setting don't necessarily align to how things are done real world in the field setting, and that was an unexpected thing for you.
Yeah, and even in our academy, so I think there were like 4 or 5 weeks at the end where those people who had to still get their firefighter 1 and 2 had gotten it and passed the test. So then they had 4 weeks or so to kind of be like, okay, here's your introduction into the way that you're probably going to see some things in the field. But even then, it's so wildly dependent on your crew and your territory and your station and everything like that, yeah, they can go over certain cultural things that are kind of citywide, but as anybody who works in a department of, a couple stations or more can tell you, you have 3 shifts, we have 14 stations, so the way, there's a ton of different ways the same thing is handled throughout the city. Of course, everything, we have SOGs, so everything is a guideline, and, you try to follow the guideline as much as possible, but we're kind of given the ability, or the lieutenants are given the ability to make their best judgment call. So some lieutenants just have have preferences over other ones, and some things work for some territories and some things don't work for others.
When a new firefighter comes in, especially if they come from another organization, like you came from the Marine Corps into Madison, so the Marine Corps had spent 6 years teaching you how they wanted you to be a firefighter, and then you came into this organization, which was obviously a different culture. It's not military, it's municipal. What would be your advice to a new firefighter coming in who's maybe served somewhere else, but now they're coming into a new organization that might have a different way of doing things? And maybe that firefighter coming in has some great ideas about things that they think would work better based on what they've been previously trained, or they've got these ambitions and great ideas, but they might be coming into a station that's pretty established in how they do things. What would be your advice to that newer firefighter? Would it just be like, keep your mouth shut for a period of time, or how do you kind of plant ideas of change, based on the experiences that you've had?
So I would say for a little while, I know some old school people are of the mindset of you're new and essentially you should just be seen and not heard for the first 20 years of your career. They always say, get some time on this, that, and the other. And to a certain extent, especially when you're brand new, whether you come with experience or you don't, you need some time to just take it all in. You need some time to run some calls and to get used to how your crew does it, because you might come in and say, well, we did this at our old department or something like that, but your old department isn't the department that you're on now, and it might be different kinds of calls and different building constructions and different, everything's just so different that you got to take a little bit of time to kick back, learn, just take everything in, learn it, and who knows, maybe after 6 months you're like, man, that idea really wouldn't have gone over very well. Or maybe you're like, this idea could really, help us out now that you've got a little bit of, it's hard to say experience, but you got a little bit of some calls under your belt, and you're starting to understand the culture and how things run and your territory and your crew. And that's the other thing too, you got to learn your crew, because if you come into a station, and this wasn't my experience, but some people do come out of the academy and they go to stations where there are a lot of senior people who are nearing the end of their career, so they're not really all that interested in changing the way things have been. So that's the other portion of it too, is you got to kind of feel out your audience a little bit. But as far as once you get to the point where you feel like you might have something worthwhile, is I found the best way is to just show people, to kind of prove it. So I do things like suggest drills. If there's something that I've found that I want to try and I think could be faster or better or easier or whatever, I'll talk, and my lieutenants are very open to drilling and doing the things that we suggest, and they're very empowering to the firefighters. But I would, if I saw something about hose line deployment and I wanted, I said there's something in here that I think we could implement into a certain deployment of a certain hose line that we have, I'd say, let's go out and drill on the apartment line. Okay, so we go out, we pick a place, we drill on the apartment line, you got to pull all the hose out, it got kind of wrapped around this tree and the coupling kind of got stuck in this bush, It went good, but it wasn't super smooth. We had to chase the line a little bit. and then that's when you kind of say, hey, I saw a video or I read an article or something like that. Can we try this real quick and just see if it's any better or any worse? And you do it, and if it's better, it's kind of the proof is in the pudding. If you do the same exact drill twice, just changing one thing or another between them, that kind of plants the seeds in other people's heads that, hey, instead of dragging 400 feet of hose on the ground, we bundled it up and put it up on our shoulders, so it's not dragging, couplings aren't getting caught on the curb and under tires and in bushes and stuff like that. So it's just, I think the best way is to just try it. And of course you gotta, that leaves you in a very vulnerable position, because if you suggest to try something and it doesn't work or you mess it up or something like that, that can really kind of open you up for an ego check. And you just got to be comfortable enough with yourself to own your mistakes, or say, well, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was.
Well, a progressive firefighter is going to attend training outside their own department. They'll go to a fire school or an independent class that is being hosted somewhere in the region, that they're bringing in a speaker to present on a particular topic. And I know you're pretty progressive about attending outside training. Do you feel then any kind of sense of obligation or responsibility to bring those good ideas that you learn back to your department, or do you just look at it as an opportunity to make yourself better as an individual? Do you have this sense of responsibility to share it with your crew, the things that you learn, or is that, is a crew interested in learning from somebody that goes to school? And I'm not talking just about your particular crew, but your ideas in general.
I feel like it all depends. Mm-hmm. I personally feel an obligation to come back and share that information with as many people as possible, because I have the mantra, as a lot of other people do, and I didn't come up with it, I just adopted it, that I don't do everything I do for me, and I don't do everything, I do what I do because of our crew, and then we do everything because of the people we serve. So me going off to a class and learning a new technique for something, number one, if I just come in and all of a sudden do some crazy new technique that nobody has seen or practiced before, chances are that technique's going to fail, because there's not a lot of, there's some little stuff here and there, but as a whole, generally you need some sort of team kind of strength to get the overall picture done. So yes, if I can mask up with my gloves on in under 10-15 seconds, but the firefighter I'm riding with, I never shared that information on how to pre-tighten your straps and make your helmet, put some tape ball at the end of your helmet strap so it's easier to grab in gloves. And if I don't share those techniques with it, what good is it for me to be able to mask up in 15 seconds if the person who I'm going in on the line with or going into search with takes a minute to mask up? That doesn't do anything. Mm-hmm. So I feel a huge obligation to bring back as much as I can, and a lot of that is a almost kind of a learning experience for me, because you go to the class, you get taught it, and then if you come back and try to share those techniques, I feel like it helps those techniques set in better. And then you also have sounding boards. So the other firefighters, might say, well, what about this? And you go, oh my God, I never even thought about that. Mm-hmm. Or you might bring it back and try it out and just say, man, that sounded really good and it worked really good when we did it on the drill ground at that training, but for how our rigs are set up or how our department is set up or how our first box alarm is set up, that just ain't going to work for us, which is totally fine. Not everything works for everyone. We're not the FDNY, and we're not a rural department that has to do tanker tender ops. So and there are plenty of times I've gone to these classes that are taught by phenomenal people that just some of the ideas just aren't gonna translate. And I think any of those people that do teach those classes understand that. They're just trying to give you as many tools for the toolbox as possible, and then it's your job to open up the toolbox and say, well, I need a crescent wrench, not a hammer.
Well, obviously, different officers have different ways that they manage their crews. And being in a department of this size, there's going to be times when you'll have a fill-in officer on your shift, or you might work an overtime shift and you have to go to another station and you'll be working for another officer. What's the process? What's a good advice for a firefighter about how to feel out that officer who's different than the one they're used to working for, so that they don't get off on the wrong foot with an officer whose style might be vastly different than what they're used to?
Yeah, this was kind of a little bit more difficult when I was brand new, and feel just dirty for even talking, let alone asking a lieutenant a question. But the best success I've had is just honestly being forward with them. Just they walk into your house in the morning, or you walk into their house in the morning. Good morning, introduce yourself, of course, if you've never worked together, this, that, and the other, and just say, hey, I've never worked with you, or we haven't worked together in a while. What kind of specific things do you like? What do you like on EMS calls? If we have a fire today and we're first due, what do you like? Are we going to loop a hydrant and just lay line? Are we going to leave somebody at the hydrant? Some people are huge transitional attack people, so they'll say, if we have fire showing from a window, we're going to transitional attack. So just kind of being forward. And I know for us, at least, a lot of lieutenants that come in to fill in on a regular crew, they'll just, you say, hey, anything crazy specific, and unless they have just something very very specific that they want, they'll just say, what do you guys do? And a lot of them are normally pretty, you tell them, hey, normally, unless it's a real rager, we just lay a line. We don't leave somebody at the hydrant. We like to have our people for that initial line. On EMS calls, we generally do this, and most of the time they're like, yeah, cool, if that's your system, that's what we're going to do today.
The firefighters that come in on a fill to your station, or you go to another station, what kind of conversation is there at the firefighter to firefighter level? I mean, do you do anything to kind of vet somebody to say, you might have to trust your life to that person that you're meeting now for the first time, and 10 minutes later, you could be crawling down a dark hallway with each other. Is there any process that firefighters use to kind of screen that person that their life might depend upon, or is there just a blind kind of trust there?
I mean, to a certain extent, you get assigned where you're assigned, and it's not like you can be like, oh, so-and-so's not super great, I'd like to swap them out with someone else. But for better or for worse, you get a reputation, and that reputation follows you out of your house and across the city and across the different shifts. So generally, unless that person is brand new, you know something about them. You've either worked with them before, you know somebody who's worked for them. stuff like that. And, there's just certain days that you have to change your expectations a little bit. You might have to say, I'm going to really have to run to keep up with this person because I know they are an absolute animal on the fire ground. Or there might be some days where, you're like, okay, we're going to have to, slow the timetable down a little bit when things might not be quite as aggressive or fast as it would be with my normal crew. As far as just general stuff with the firefighters in the back, kind of the same thing. So we have riding assignments, so you know what your general job is, depending on where you're riding on any given call. But you might talk with them and say, hey, do you guys do anything different? Is there anything different on the rig I need to know about? Talk about tool selection. Some people split the irons. Some people say, no, I want to keep the irons together and I'll take them. All that kind of stuff.
How important is mentors to a newer firefighter coming in? That senior person that you get connected with that kind of gives you the lay of the land and the do's and the don'ts, and they go out of their way to be a teacher for you or a guide for you. Is there a formal mentorship program here, and how does that work, or is it kind of more informal?
There's a formal mentorship program during the recruit academy. They take volunteers from the field, generally people who are newer, who have been through the academy in the past 1 or 2 years. They don't want, and that's more a mentorship of how to get through the academy. If you're struggling with skills, you can reach out to that person and ask for tips and tricks and stuff like that. As far as getting out to the field, the mentorship is more informal, so it kind of falls on the shoulders of the senior guy or senior guys, depending on how many different folks you have at your station. But to that new person, that mentorship, clinging on to somebody who is competent and good, is completely invaluable. I mean, that's where you're going to learn the most. That's where you learn from somebody who's been on a while, so they know the nuances of the fire department that you're working for, and they probably know your bosses a little better because they've worked with them for any number of given years, and they know the territory better, and they know the types of calls that you go on better. They know those known addresses and challenging spots for hose line deployment, or challenging spots for ventilation and ladder deployments, and generally those people have quite a few years on and have lived their mistakes, and it seems like most of those people are willing to pass it on, so you don't you can try not to make the same mistakes they did.
Mm-hmm. Tell the listeners a little bit about the station that you work at, as far as what you have for apparatus and what role you play.
Yeah, so I work at called a double company. So we have an engine, a tower ladder, and an ambulance. Just a little bit about our staffing. Our engine is a lieutenant, a driver, 2 firefighters in the back. The tower ladder is a lieutenant, driver, 2 firefighters in the back. And then the ambulance is staffed with 2 firefighter paramedics. Everybody who rides the big rigs are all EMT. And then we're also the hazardous materials station, so we cross-staff our hazardous materials rig.
Okay, so what do you ride on?
So the firefighters switch back and forth between the engine and the ladder. As just kind of an informal rotation thing. So, one day I'll ride the engine, and then the next day I'll ride the ladder, and then, depending on staffing, I might ride the ladder again, or I might ride the engine for a whole swing. It all just depends. We all just kind of take turns. And
then how's the hazmat staffed?
So everybody at our station, unless they're a fill-in, is part of the hazmat team. So depending on the size of the incident, if it's a smaller incident just within the city, so like a engine company is on a tractor trailer that ripped its saddle tank open, we might only take 4 people. We might take the crew from the ladder, move them over to the hazmat rig, take the crew from the engine, move them over to the ladder, and take the engine out of service. And then they'll go and just assist. But if it's a big call or if it's outside the city, we'll take both big rigs out of service and all go over to the hazmat rig and take all 10 of us.
Now, you had said that you alternate between the engine and the truck. Is part of your rotation onto a med unit as well?
No. So, right now we have it so you volunteer to go to medic school, and once you get licensed as a paramedic, you primarily ride the med unit. Every once in a while, you get a day where you get to ride on the engine or the ladder.
Okay, so the people in the med unit predominantly stay on the med unit and for some period of time in their career.
Yep. Yeah, and we don't have any like minimum amount of time you have to stay on the med unit or any seniority type thing for being able to get off the medic unit.
Mm-hmm. Now, we're in the midst of a pandemic. What has been the impact of COVID on your community, on your department, on your station, on staffing? What has changed as a result of this to what the world was like pre-COVID?
Well, there's a lot less multi-company training. They're trying to keep the each firehouse kind of isolated from another. So, if there were to be an outbreak of COVID within the fire department, hopefully it doesn't, run rampant. They can keep it to a station or whatever. Medical calls, it's changed a lot because we're going with, once again, as little exposure as possible. So, hats off to those guys, but the med units have been taking the brunt of it. So if it's a call where they honestly just don't need the extra hands, we'll just stand by outside in the rig, and they let us know if they need one of us or if we can return once they get the patient in the ambulance. So I feel really bad for the we had a new academy class come out it was like right away in January, and then some of them had to get their EMT license, so that was another 4 weeks. So some of those people came out in like late February, right as all this was starting. So some of those poor guys, haven't had a chance to really do a whole lot of hands-on patient care and practice doing vitals and stuff like that. So we're starting to see that we have to supplement a lot of our EMS experience into the stations and through training and stuff, which has normally not been something we need to do, because as any fire department that runs EMS will tell you, that's a very, very large percentage of their call volume. So, when you're seeing patient after patient after patient, you get good at taking blood pressures, and you get good at doing assessments, and you get pretty good with just your everyday medical stuff at the EMT level. So that kind of left fire training as our primary our primary go-to for training, because of course you don't run as many fires as you'd like to. So you need to practice extra to keep those skills up and keep yourself sharp. But now we're starting to see where, we're starting to get a little rusty on some of those EMT skills, and even helping medics in the back of the ambulance. You get in and they ask you for a supply or whatever, and you're like, oh my goodness, it's been like 6 months since I've been in the back of an ambulance, just because, once again, you're trying to avoid as much contact as possible. So it's been a big change. And like I said, I feel really bad for those people that came out right away in January or February. I mean, COVID is all they've known, and that kind of sucks because COVID in the fire department really sucks. We're distancing ourselves in the stations, doing all that stuff, wearing masks and stuff like that. But, it's just not the same when you're not sitting around the kitchen table at, 10 p.m. joking and laughing and telling stories and, this, that, and the other. It's just a very different firehouse dynamic. My crew's really good. We try to keep as much of that alive as possible while still adhering to guidelines and stuff like that. But yeah, it's not 100% the same.
Do you have a different cleaning protocol now at the station than pre-COVID?
Oh yeah. So rigs get sprayed down. Interior get sprayed down every day. We have stuff to sanitize our SCBA regulators. Station gets sanitized. We have Clorox wipes and stuff like that for telephones and keyboards and light switches and door handles and countertops, and it's added quite a bit of time onto our cleaning, but it is what it is.
And call volume wise, how has the pandemic affected the overall call volume? And I know you don't have the numbers in front of you, but just how you sense it to be, or did calls go up? Did calls go down? Did they go down and now they're back up again? What do you feel based on the calls that you have had at your station? How has it trended?
So when the first round of lockdowns went into place, whenever that was, March-ish area, calls plummeted. I mean, it was crazy. We were sitting around saying, "Oh my goodness, and that's attributed to nobody wanted to go to the hospitals because they thought if you went to a hospital, you were going to get COVID and you were going to not have a favorable outcome." And then so that first round of lockdowns kind of finished, and you came into spring/summer, and it went back to probably right where it should have been. And then now, I haven't seen the latest round of numbers for maybe a couple months, but I'd be willing to say call volume is probably up slightly from what we would typically expect to see.
Okay. Let me switch off of COVID. If you had to look back on your first 5 years, what advice would you offer someone based on, say, good things that have happened to you, mistakes that you've made? If you had to offer like the best advice to a new firefighter coming in about how to keep their motivation up, maybe they're in a station environment that isn't, as forward-thinking and open-minded as yours is. Offer some encouragement to that firefighter coming in new.
Well, my biggest daily motivator is that I took an oath to serve the people of my city, and I take that oath very seriously. And my daily motivation is I want to be the best firefighter that I possibly can for the people that I serve. And, following that downstream, that means I'm the best possible firefighters for my fellow firefighters. So, I'm an asset versus a liability on the fire ground. And then, of course, being the best I can is good for me and my family, too, because it increases your likelihood of, going home at the end of the shift. So I think that's a huge motivator. You got to understand that you are just one very small cog in a whole mess of gears that make the system turn. And it's up to you to be the best that you can possibly be, because if you have something that happens and it's not good, I don't know if I could handle myself looking back and saying, well, geez, man, if I'd have just spent a little more time throwing ladders, or I'd have spent a little more time pulling hose lines, or I'd have spent a little more time on my EMS, maybe that wouldn't have happened. And of course, some terrible things have happened to even the greatest of firefighters, but you gotta just keep that moving. And it's tough when you have a crew that maybe isn't so big into training, but there are so many people out there, especially with social media and YouTube and groups and stuff like that, fools organizations, everything, that you can get linked up with very like-minded people, and it's so easy to feed off of each other. There's different Facebook groups out there that every once in a while somebody will post, a challenge. They'll say, videotape yourself on how fast you can mask up, and then, it kind of turns into a friendly competition of how fast you can mask up with your gloves on, or, hey, here's a video on a technique I saw for, dealing with the 35-foot extension ladder. And, it's really easy to listen to some of the, and some of the instructors out there. Not only are they wonderful tacticians and really good with skills, but they're motivators too. The way they speak and present their material and everything just makes you want to be better every day. So it's a matter of getting kind of hooked up with them. And then, of course, hopefully your senior firefighter is kind of the same way and is a huge motivator to be better, because they're out training with you and they're out running tips and tricks with you, and little tailboard drills here and there. But if they're not, like I said, there's enough people out there. Talk to some other people who are on other fire departments. They might say, hey, here's my senior guy, give him a call, talk to him. Or you get hooked up with somebody on Facebook, and it's kind of the nice thing about social media is if you're like a firefighter with a year on and you're struggling with some motivation, or struggling to get find somebody who wants to give you some skills, like find somebody on Facebook who posts those videos or posts the challenges and post these tips and tricks, and just reach out to them. People who are true senior firefighters and true mentors do not care. They're not going to be like, oh, well, this dude just reached out to me and I went on his Facebook profile and turns out he's only been on for 6 months. They're not even going to look, because they're just going to see somebody who wants to be better, and they're just going to naturally want to help that person.
What is some advice you would give up the chain of command? Like, if you could talk to company officers that are out there from the firefighter's point of view, what are some of those things that the really good company officers could be doing or should be doing to help keep the firefighters who are under their command, to keep them well trained, to keep them motivated? Give them some advice from the firefighter's perspective. If you could just have a little secret conversation with them, what would you tell them?
Yeah. Number one thing would be to do trainings. Get out there, train, get your hands dirty, because number one, that shows the firefighters how to do the skill, and then it also builds kind of a rapport. When you're young, you can get a little cocky and be like, well, hey, so and so is old and within 3 years of retirement and this, that, and the other. And if you go out and show them that you know what you're talking about and you can do the skills, that builds a lot of respect. The other thing I would say is keep your trainings relevant and keep them to the point and keep them relatively short.
What's that mean?
What is relatively short? Like an hour or less, or
I'd probably go 45 minutes or less.
is that just classroom or hands-on too?
No, hands-on too. So I understand that there are some evolutions and some things that you are going to have to spend extra time on. But, if you say, hey, in the morning we're going to go out and we're going to pull some hose, and then in the afternoon we're going to go, throw a few ladders on a new construction building. Don't make it some crazy big scenario. Don't make it, you got to unmount the deck gun and hump 1,000 feet of LDH and this, that, and the other. Go out and just be proficient at the basics, because everything starts at the basics. And I'm not the first to make this metaphor, and I won't be the last, but it goes back to sports. These professional athletes show up to practice, and they practice the basics until they can't get it wrong. And then what do? They practice it even more until it becomes so ingrained in them. So, keep it relevant and keep it relatively short, 45 minutes or less, because then you're keeping people's attention. Some scenarios people get way off into the weeds and this, that, and the other, and then by the end of the drill you're like, what are we even drilling on here? What did I learn? What did we gain from that? I'm more confused than I am when we first started.
You had used the word practice, and a friend of mine who's the fire chief in Comox, British Columbia, is pretty active on his social media, and he's pretty consistent about putting pictures up of his department. They have a training facility behind their station, and he puts these pictures up, and he says, we had a great practice tonight. And very often calls what they're doing not training, but practice. And I asked him why, and he said, well, if they already know the skills, then when we come together, we're not training, we're practicing. Just like sports teams practice, just like people practice, music to get better. They're not learning how to read music. They're practicing on how to be better at what they're playing. And it's interesting that you use the term practice, because when you think about well-trained firefighters going out and throwing ladders, if they think that it's training, they could adopt the mind, I already know how to do that. Geez, I already know how to throw ladders. And if you say, well, it's practicing throwing ladders, it's not training, it's practicing, does that set better? The chief in Comox thinks that that's the key is to not have well-trained firefighters thinking that you have to retrain them. And every time you get together, you're training, where a lot of times when you get together, you're practicing just basic skills, just to stay sharp at those skills and the coordination of truck and engine together and that kind of thing. Does that resonate or make sense?
I mean, it makes sense. I used that term almost on accident. I think the term training has just become an overarching. You got to be a pretty pretty word-driven person to really think, the difference between training and practice, and I'm not that smart, so I never really thought about it, but it makes sense. The term training is almost, here is a new set of skills versus practicing, which is just doing what you already know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really interesting. I might have to kind of slowly start slipping that in and see if it
resonates. Yeah.
That could be interesting.
Is there anything that you'd like to share that we haven't covered because I didn't ask you the right question? That whole motivation thing. I know we talked about it, but it is just so important to be motivated, take pride, take the time to, do a proper equipment check and take care of your tools and set your gear up the way you want. I've had
some people say, you get shipped out to a different station and you get back from an EMS call and you hang your coat and radio on the handrail on the outside, and you push your boots out, and you make sure your boots aren't on your suspenders and everything like that, and your hood's the way you want it, so when you put it on, your face actually comes through the face hole and not backwards, and all that stuff. And people go, why are you doing that? We're just going to go on another EMS call, and you're just going to have to throw it all in the rig anyway. And you just kind of laugh it off, because the people that say those kinds of things obviously don't have the mindset that you do, and you're probably not going to change them with just a chance encounter. But I do all that because I want to be prepared for the worst possible event, which of course is a structure fire. So yes, if I have to take an extra 5 seconds to toss my boots up in the rig and toss my coat into the rig when we go on an EMS call, versus fumbling over your boots, and now you got there and you were lazy and you didn't, your suspenders are sitting in between your boots because that's how you carry them, and then you go to pull them up and now you got to step back out, and you're wasting valuable time. And then also that just, at least from the times that I've been caught kind of off guard because of one thing or another, an equipment switch over, or we're in the middle of training and your gear's up in the rig instead of out because you're washing it, or even something as simple as that, man, that just flusters the crap out of you, because it's not the way that you're expecting it to be. So if I can set everything up the exact way I want it to be, at this point, I've put on my gear enough times that it is absolute muscle memory. So I can be thinking about things while I'm putting my gear on. I can be thinking, I know this address. This is an apartment complex. We go there all the time for fire alarms, and nobody's ever evacuating. So chances are good, if this is the one, we're going to be pulling an awful lot of people out. Or we've been here before, and I know that there's a private hydrant in there, and it sucks, and the next hydrant is this far away, so we might need to think, it might be a good time to suggest a split lay for our supply line and all that kind of stuff. So if I can just take as much out of my brain power as possible, because of course you're the expert in talking about your brain under stress, essentially you go from normal human being to just above probably a baboon when the tones go off, because your adrenaline's pumping and everything like that. If I can free up as much brain power as I possibly can by making certain things muscle memory, I'm doing myself a service, again, my crew a service, and ultimately the people I serve.
How do you keep yourself from, there's that address that's always false alarm, or somebody left food on the stove and it's setting the alarm off, and you've been there time and time again. How do you keep yourself from getting on the truck and saying this is just going to be another smells and bells, or burnt food, or we're going to get canceled before we get there, so no need to be too on guard about this, because this is our 30th time going there and we haven't had a working fire there yet.
Right. That's really, really tough, and that's where you got to just take a look at yourself and say, if I get up into the rig and I'm only wearing my pants and not my coat, not my SCBA, and my hood's not on, and I don't come off the rig ready to work and with tools, am I going to be able to live with myself when I pop that apartment door where the smoke alarm's going on and it's banked down to the floor, and I got to go back out to the rig and get dressed, and once again that flusters you to no end. We run a fair amount of calls, but we don't run enough calls to the point where, I just get absolutely burnt out of being in my gear. Mm-hmm. It's really... it's too easy. It's too easy to just get dressed every time. And it's practice. It's practice once again. So, you're good at getting your gear on. You're fast at getting your gear on. You come off the rig. It's the muscle memory of, and all this little stuff sounds stupid, but if you think about it from a learning perspective and muscle memory and the whole sports practice analogy, even something as simple as, if you run a lot of EMS calls like we do, you don't get out of the rig in full gear all that often. So, I mean, how stupid would it be if you went to go and get off the rig and, all of a sudden you're falling down the steps because you just, you refuse to. It's just practice. It's practice. And you get a little sweaty. So what? Go back to the station, change your shirt. To me, it's not that big of a deal. It's too easy to be prepared. And like I said, should I ever come across a situation where, I could never live with myself if a lazy, I tried to avoid using that word, but ultimately that's what it comes down to. If my laziness costs somebody anything, property, life, time, I don't know if I could go home to my family and say I'm a firefighter, because at that point you just have completely neglected to do your job. And those may sound like strong words to some people. Oh wow, he takes it really seriously. And
that's a pretty serious business.
I do take it very seriously, and if those words, maybe make your chest feel a little funny, it might be time to just take a quick look internal and make sure that you have the right mindset.
All right, well, thanks for sitting down with me 5 years after our first sit down. You think as much as we talk back and forth about the fire service and many, many other things, that we wouldn't have let 5 years grow between our two chances to have a recorded conversation. But I appreciate you taking some time and sitting down with me and sharing this perspective. I think it's going to be very helpful to that new firefighter and that firefighter that's in that spot that you're in, that's got coming into that 5 years of experience, because it's an awkward place to be, because you're not new anymore, but you're not quite to like senior man status. You're kind of like hung up in the middle of, it's almost like adolescence of the fire service. You're not a little boy anymore, but not quite full on man level.
It's very awkward teenage years. You still make your fair share of mistakes. Yet there's people below you that look up to you to not make those mistakes. So, and I'll finish off by saying, if anybody out there who's listening to this is struggling for some motivation, reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to hook you up with some people who've been instrumental in my mindset and everything. Okay,
I'll include your email in the show notes.
Yep.
If somebody wants to reach you, they can contact you there. So thanks again, Cameron.
Yep.
Thank you again to my guest, Cameron.Gasaway, for sharing your experience with us. Since 2007, SA Matters instructors have helped more than 1,200 organizations and 87,000 individuals improve high-risk decision-making, including military personnel, business leaders, medical professionals, utility workers, highway workers, aviation workers, oil refinery operators, and more. If you or someone you care about works in a high-risk, high-consequence decision-making environment, then we are here to help to improve their safety and survival and to help them accomplish the most important mission of all, and that is to go home to the ones who love them. Since the start of this pandemic, I've had the opportunity to present some amazing virtual programs for audiences ranging from 6 to 400. And just when I thought we were making the turn on the pandemic and getting back to live programs, we've had a setback. Two of the agencies that I was to present live sessions for in November have had to postpone because of COVID outbreaks in their departments. So the Clark County Fire District Number 6 program and the Anchorage Fire Department programs will be conducted sometime in 2021. On November 24th, I'll be doing a situational awareness and thermal imaging program with Andy Starnes from Insight Training. December 8th, I'll be doing a program for the La Crosse, Wisconsin Fire Department called the Leaders Toolbox, Building Tomorrow's Leaders Today. Thank you to the organizations that have allowed me to offer your members virtual training and now live events. If you're interested in hosting a program, just go to the SA Matters website and click on the Contact Us tab, and I'll give you a call. Finally, remember to check the show notes for how to follow us on social media and to subscribe to our newsletter. There we share ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to be critical thinkers and resilient problem solvers. Well, that's it. Episode 345 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you again to my guest, Madison Firefighter Cameron.Gasaway. Thank you to our amazing Platinum sponsor for almost 7 years now, Midwest Fire. Thank you to our feature segment sponsor, Gasaway Virtual Training. And thank you to our associate sponsor, Chief Miller. But most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters show with Dr. Richard Gasaway. If you're interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit his website, samatters.com. If you're interested in booking Dr. Gasaway for a program, or if you would like to be a guest on his show, click the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage.